smaller chair?
Maybe we should put you in between so you don't look like you're so far. Yeah.
No problem.
It's not complicated. I'm just being real. Like, it's not complicated. Hey, be real with yourself. Thank you. Whatever y'all want to do. I'm not that special. I got that.
Alrighty. Oh, jeez. Alrighty, everyone. We're going to get started. So find your way to a seat, please, in the next minute or two. Thanks.
Like these bones. Thank you. It really passed. Tell me. I'm gonna wait.
Alrighty, everyone. We're going to get started here before too much of the night goes away. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Urban Planning Alumni Association's 13th Annual Planning in a Pint. Tonight, we are going to discuss transportation as a safety issue. What can planners do about it? First, my name is Sam. I'm the president of the current Urban Planning Alumni Association. So I just have a couple of announcements before I turn it over to Kate. So, first we got some awesome music coming out. I like the warm-up music. First, we'd like to thank Abby and the UWM Alumni Association for paying for the food and helping us organize this entire event. They're a great support every year, and we really appreciate their help. So, thank you. If you are a UWM alum, and are interested in helping fundraise, there is information for 414 Day at the front table there. A couple other announcements. Our Planning by Bike event is May 20th, if any of you would like to attend. We'll be in the city of Milwaukee this year, so keep an eye out for more of that information, where we'll tour some sites by bike and have some urban planning conversation that way. As well as the Sanders Scholarship. There is information at the front table. You are all hit up for a scholarship donation from registering this event. But we have a couple scholarships, including the Sanders Scholarship, that are up for $5,000 matches as a part of 414 Day. We need 15 people to donate to unlock that $5,000. So please do that. That Sanders Scholarship goes to help minority people and people who aren't represented in the urban planning profession go through the Masters of Planning program. So please donate when you get that information for 414 Day later. Forgetting anything else? I think that's it. So with that, I will turn it over to Kate. She is the Senior Transportation Planner and the Interim Safe Streets Coordinator for the City of Milwaukee to kick off our conversation tonight.
Thank you all for coming out on this really beautiful night. As we were reflecting on this wonderful weather, we remembered that we've had really great weather every morning in Pint. So we've continued the tradition tonight. So first of all, we've had a couple of last minute changes to our panel due to bad weather in Madison, even worse than here. and a family emergency. Renee Calloway from the City of Madison and Melody McCurtis from Metcalf Park Community Bridges could not join us, but we have two amazing subs to fill their place. So immediately to my right is Mike Amston, who is the multimodal transportation planning manager at the City of Milwaukee.
Woo, woo.
We have Rachel Taylor, the executive director of the Brady Street Bid. Alderwoman Joe Castazamarica from the 8th District in the City of Milwaukee. And Julie Sharp, who is the chief visionary leader for Lady Ventures. And Michael May, who is the senior civil engineer for traffic and transportation for the City of Wauwatosa. So in January of this year alone, 8 people lost their lives due to traffic crashes in the City of Milwaukee, including 1-year-old Darian Robinson, who died in a crash involving a stolen vehicle. Just this past Sunday, 23-year-old Latrell White lost his life after crashing his car into a home. Last year, we lost 73 people to traffic violence in the City of Milwaukee, 106 in Milwaukee County, and 598 in Wisconsin. This is not a problem that's unique to Milwaukee. In just the first 9 months of 2022, nearly 32,000 people lost their lives in traffic crashes across the country. That would be the equivalent of the entire population of West Bend, Wisconsin, dying in 9 months. Tonight we're framing traffic safety as a public health crisis, which means it's a complex issue that involves many different sectors and impedes individuals and communities from being healthy. Worldwide, traffic crashes are a leading cause of death and disability. The driving behavior on our streets instills fear in our residents, making them reluctant to walk or bike. And when driving, there are certain streets that people avoid altogether. And like every other social issue in this country, the continued and lasting impacts of racism and segregation can't be ignored. Past land use and transportation planning decisions have often led to wide streets and vacant land in Black, Brown, and poor communities, creating streets with high speeds that have led to a disproportionate amount of crashes, of serious crashes in these neighborhoods. We normalize traffic fatalities and serious injuries, expecting that we'll have some number of deaths on our roads, assuming it's the cost we have to pay for the freedom to move around. We call these deaths tragic accidents, a term that implies that nothing could have been done to prevent it. But there is an increasing awareness that something can be done, and the majority of these traffic crashes are, in fact, preventable. Cities like Milwaukee and Madison have adopted Vision Zero, a comprehensive approach to traffic safety that begins with the belief that no one should have to risk their lives to walk, bike, or take transit or drive, and sets a goal of 0 traffic-related crashes and serious injuries. Rather than relying on individuals to make safe driving choices, Vision Zero creates a system, a transportation system where safe driving is the default. Creating that new system will require a multi-sector approach and difficult decisions, and planners will be integral to solving this public health crisis. Tonight, we're joined by 5 panelists who all bring different knowledge and expertise to this issue. We're not going to walk away with any simple solutions, but we are going to leave with a better understanding of the impacts of traffic violence and the steps cities and community advocates can take to address it. So we're framing this issue of traffic safety as a public health crisis. Each of you brings different insights and perspectives to the issue. As you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the role you play in understanding or solving this crisis.
All right, thank you, Kate, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's an honor to be up here with the other panelists. My name is Mike Amston. I'm the multimodal transportation manager for the City of Milwaukee. Those opening remarks were quite telling and kind of really hit home. 4 years ago, I was up here on a panel with a couple folks in the room here tonight, and we were talking about complete streets and kind of the beauty of streets and how we can make them better and more enjoyable. And in 4 short years, that narrative has really switched to this very somber, very serious, very severe crisis we face. And unfortunately, it's not unique to Milwaukee, but it is a major, major issue here in Milwaukee. So in my role and the role of many people here in the room, there's a lot of my colleagues and people we work with on a regular basis trying to address this issue. as a planner, we do a lot of implementing for the city. We build partnerships, we work with community members, many of which are up here right now. We analyze data that kind of bears exactly what Kate was mentioning. But I'd say probably tonight what I'll focus a little bit on is kind of the street design aspect and what our infrastructure looks like and the importance of that. Lately, it's been really a focus on traffic safety and how do we make our streets safe, which is really important, but I fear and I don't want to lose the importance of ensuring that our streets are made walkable and bikeable and easy to use transit, because that's all way more important than talking about safety in the grand scheme of things. We need our streets to be enjoyable places, streets that are fun to get around, fun places to be. So in addition to safety, it's about getting more people out of their cars and walking and biking and taking transit when they can. And that's the work we do within DPW.
Hi, I'm Rachel Taylor. I'm the Executive Director for the Brady Street bid, which makes me a little bit unusual to be on this panel because I'm not a planner in the sense as alumni. But I was really excited to be a part of this because I am working on spearheading, looking at pedestrianization options for Brady Street, which was not an easy thing to do. The reason I wanted to look at that was because for 6 years I lived in the north of England, in the Pennines, and I saw a different way of life. I saw that you can park in one place and you can do your walking and your shopping and go back to your car and get home. You don't have to park in front of places. Walking is an important part, and what I saw as a result of that were people who were healthier, which then obviously helps the NHS. It has a knock-on effect in a lot of different things. And one of the reasons when I came back to America, when I came back to Milwaukee, the first thing I thought of was the city, and no offense, but the city's ugly, because it's very industrial, and it is not enjoyable to walk. And B, I saw the knock-on effects of being in a car all the time, the health issues that come with it, the pollution that comes with it, and I was not looking forward to returning to that. We had a death on Brady Street. A young man named Arne Bast passed away. It struck everybody on the street. He was a bartender who had worked at several of our bars. He was an important person, character on the street. He had a lizard that he would walk around with all the time. He had just been at our pep parade. Arne was taken late on a Sunday night by a reckless driver. And it really, really touched on us. The next morning, I emailed Gerald and Mike and said, can we do a study for pedestrianization? I'm tired of this. Everything that we've talked about on the board isn't coming to fruition. We can't go anywhere. We need to make a radical leap. So that happened. They talked about it, and I was given, yeah, of course you can do that if you pay for it. I got the board to agree. Jonathan was already on board with it, Jonathan Brostoff, our alderman, who I was very thankful for coming into office when he did, because you need that support in order to do something big. And we were off to the races. So I'm really hoping that we can make a big difference in at least getting people familiar with the terminology and what pedestrianization can be. People do not understand it. I have a full English driver's license, American driver's license. I've been driving for 30 years. I've had 2 car accidents in my entire life that have totaled cars. Both of those accidents were on Brady Street. One on Farlow and Brady, the other one on Van Buren and Brady. I know how bad that street is in a very deep way. I want to change that. And luckily I'm in a position where I can try to do that.
Good evening, I'm Alderwoman Jocasta Zamaripa, and I want to welcome you to the 3rd Aldermanic District, which is Alderman Jonathan Brostoff's district. I'm happy to be here tonight, Jonathan. Thank you.
Happy to have you.
Thanks. I, like Rachel, feel like I shouldn't be on this panel. I'm not a planner, but I am a politician, and so I could see why Kate thinks that it's a good idea to have me up here on the panel, and I'm here to learn more than teach you guys, because I think I can learn a lot from this group. But what brings me passionate about this issue is I became an alder in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, really right after it started in April of 2020. And I came from the legislature, so from Madison. I served in the assembly with Jonathan, actually. We were Democrats in the minority in the assembly in Madison. And there I got to use my voice to fight for a lot of social issues like abortion rights and immigrant rights, pro-immigration policy, and workers and labor unions. These things were my passion, and from there I came to city government, where this has to be our passion. The issue of reckless driving is probably first and foremost on our constituents' minds these days, and so this is something that is very much a quality of life issue, maybe even more so than those issues I mentioned to you that I fought for in Madison. And so I've been doing a lot of listening and learning from folks like Kate Riordan and Mike Amston at the Department of Public Works at the City of Milwaukee. And I know there's more city folks in the audience that I just treasure, because I'm able to try to figure it out and learn myself how we're going to beat this epidemic. Thank you.
And I'll just say that Mike is the only planner on the panel, so don't feel bad.
Well, hi everybody. I'm sitting down low because I got a peg leg down here. But my name is Angelique Sharp. I am the immediate past director of the Villa Avenue Business Improvement District here in the city of Milwaukee. I love these wonderful people. I've worked with them all. I consider myself an equitable development strategist. I specialize in 4 areas of practice: economic development, community development, business development, and youth and family development. And we all know that those all intersect. And of course, the lens that I'm looking through is an equity lens. All of my work is equity focused. I do believe that all lives are of equal value. So I don't believe that just because you got money, your neighborhood should be better or whatever the case is. So I consider myself a liaison and an advocate too. So I strategize from the standpoint of coming from being born and raised in Milwaukee, in a low income, from a low income family. Also being bused out and going to predominantly white schools out of Germantown. So living, being bused to do 2 different worlds in the same day my whole life, and seeing just living 2 different lives. And my grandparents were one of the first Black families to build a house in Germantown too. So just really going to grandparents' house, seeing a different life than living in Milwaukee. But that life is the life that in Milwaukee that a lot of people from our community are experiencing. And so when working with the planners and our auditor people, high level, it allows me to be able to liaison down to my community. So, when you talk about neighborhoods where the income level is, 25,000, I know we can be like 25,000, that's no money, but it's whole families trying to live off that. And so, street planning, things like that, it's important, but it's really high level. And a lot of these conversations, these dialogues go over their heads. That's why you don't see these people in the room right now. So my job is to be able to sit at the table with these high level planners and these high level conversations, and be able to go back on the ground level and break it down, if I have to a kindergarten understanding, so people can understand that there's decisions being made, things that are happening that's impacting, like Alderwoman said, their overall quality of life. So that is my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael May and I'm a recovering traffic engineer. I'll be honest with you, it was a little intimidating when Sam asked me if I'd come in before a room of planners. Have any of you read Walkable Communities by Jeff Spack? There's a little subchapter in that book called Kill the Traffic Engineers. And so I'd like to think that my generation is bringing a new trend in traffic engineering, and that is moving away from auto focus and more towards the movement of people. People who use cars, people who use sneakers, people who use bikes, people who use wheelchairs. And I work with the city of Wauwatosa. I've been there for 5 months. Before that, I worked for 20 years in the go that way. I worked for 20 years in the private sector, working with a lot of development, and so much of that was auto-centric. It just didn't feel very fulfilling. And when the position of traffic engineer opened up at the city of Wauwatosa, and knowing some of the folks who were there, it was a real opportunity for me to kind of do a career switch. And I'm working with some phenomenal people. A couple of them are here this evening. And so in terms of my role, really I'm there to support from a traffic end of things, reviewing development plans, reviewing crash data, helping inform roadway design, working with our bike ped committee, working with our transportation affairs committee in the county council. So, thank you.
When we talk about reckless driving, traffic crashes, or fatalities and injuries from traffic violence, we often cite statistics, which is exactly what I did in the introduction. And while those numbers can be compelling, simply stating statistics can remove us from the fact that these are real people whose lives have been lost or significantly impacted. Alderwoman Zamarripa, Angelique, and Rachel, I know you touched on this in your intro, but please tell us how traffic violence has impacted your communities and how it informs your work.
Well, we're going to order then. So traffic violence, let's be real. Y'all watch the news, we see the reports, they disproportionately affect, black and brown minority communities, and it's devastating. And what's even more devastating is that it happens so often that people are becoming desensitized to it, and that is extremely dangerous. It's extremely dangerous to be in a space like that where you expect, you're expecting these conditions, and learning to accept these conditions. It's a lot of people that have that mindset, and I think that is absolutely unacceptable. I feel like, from a health, you said a health standpoint, one thing that I learned a lot from working with Mike and Kate's team is about healthy streets. And when we talk about healthy streets, and we have to say that the streets in Milwaukee, especially in certain areas outside of town, it's a crisis. It's it's an issue that's directly affecting the lives of the people over there. And it's something that I feel like I've really tried to work for. For example, Villa Avenue, a couple of years ago, we got the first ever bike lanes in the neighborhood. While we do have bike lanes and we're happy to have them, and we also have curb extensions as well, and high visibility crosswalks. These are important because the crosswalks, you couldn't even see the two painted lines anymore. So it was like cars didn't even know where to stop. They don't know where, there's no boundaries. Like, people were just everywhere. So we've begging the county council, trying to, say, hey, this is dangerous. What can we do? And, really working with, Mike, especially, and his team, we were able to, implement a road diet. I think some of you've seen some of the road diets where these wider streets were able to slim it down to one lane. It was two lanes going in each direction. Now it was one lane, and then it's two turning lanes. So then we have the turn. And then we have room for the bike lanes and the parking, but it significantly slows down the traffic. And so that's kind of just an example of how I feel like we're kind of trying to really be transparent with the work that we're doing to bring equity and healthier streets. It's a lot more work to be done, but we are starting to get that work done. So, yeah.
We've had multiple deaths on Brady Street that have been highly publicized, because if anything happens that's bad on Brady Street, it is in the news. And that's rough. That's really rough. 2 years ago, our board president lost a family member to speeding on the street. His family member was speeding. He was on a motorcycle with no helmet, blew through some lights, going entirely too fast, and
point.
These deaths are hitting us they're not just patrons, there's a family members. Mario Glorioso died of the Glorioso family, and as I mentioned, Arnie Bast. We've worked with Wisconsin Bike Federation to hold walking tutorials for people so that they can get used to, hey, there's a pedestrian, you need to stop. And that has actually improved quite a bit on Brady Street. At certain intersections, you can walk in the street and people will actually stop for you, which is great. But I think one of the biggest problems in what I'm trying to tell people, I mean, hey, why are you doing pedestrianization? I need to get to work. It's like, because exactly that. Brady Street's a neighborhood. It is not a thoroughfare. You need to respect the fact that it's a neighborhood. You need to slow down. All of our signs, all of the things that we've implemented so far have not gotten you to slow down. You're too damn worried about getting to work on time. And that's harming us. So we need to jump to the next big step. And everybody likes to say speed humps, but that is not a fix for this. That's great for residential areas. It's not appropriate for this. We need something bigger and better. So I think what I'm trying to do is impress upon people, you're losing actual family members. This is why we need to do this. Get over whatever things you're seeing in your head and move forward so that we can have a safe neighborhood, because a safe neighborhood is good for business. I have an MBA. I like good business, but I'm not gonna get that just by promoting the businesses. I need the whole area to be strong for us to have good business.
So this is a great question. I meant to bring a photo with me for this one, but of course I didn't. But I wanted to tell you guys that early on, after I became an alder in 2020, we had a terrible traffic fatality, not in my district actually, a little further south in the district of Alderman Scott Spiker. But she was a leader in the Latino community, and I do represent a Latino supermajority district on Milwaukee's near south side. And I knew this woman personally, Teresita Contreras, her name was, and she was a leader in the community. She was a health educator with Coral Centro, and many a community event I would see her facilitating Zumba or starting a walking group. She was, her work devoted her to trying to get our community more active to combat diabetes and obesity and that type of thing. And so she did great work. She was a tremendous bright light. And she and her husband were driving to pick up their daughter, and a reckless driver crashed into them at a very high rate of speed, and they both died. These two parents of 3 girls. And so it was a huge tragedy, as you can imagine, and I went to the sentencing of the woman who killed these 2 parents. And I remember Judge Borowski berating me as I spoke, and the family asked me to be one of the speakers at sentencing. And he laid the blame for reckless driving at the feet of the Common Council. And frankly, Alderman Michael Murphy specifically, he named as well. And I thought that was really unfair of him to do that, especially in that moment, because we were all hurting and I was with the family. But it informed my work tremendously. And not too long after that, I think we allocated the first ARPA dollars towards reckless driving, a reckless driving initiative. With the bulk of it, it was something like 7 million plus, and about 6 million went to DPW, the Department of Public Works, to work on traffic calming measures and the like. Speed humps, we did put some money into speed humps, lowering the speed limit, but I'm not sure if Mike just stopped that or not. That's probably something we can talk about tonight. Not this Mike, Michael. And then we did a little over $1 million on enforcement, and I know that's another question that we'll talk about later. That million and some change went to MPD, the Milwaukee Police Department. And I know we'll talk about how people feel about enforcement and what place that they have to help us address this public health crisis. But I wanted to, looking at this question tonight, I wanted to tell you that for me, Teresita embodies this public health crisis that we're having, and what a huge loss that it was to lose her, she and her husband, that terrible day. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those stories, and as Angelique said, we have gotten just too desensitized to this, and it's tough to hear about those lives lost. So there's a growing public awareness and acknowledgement that high driving speeds and reckless driving behavior are enabled by street design. We've already touched on this a little bit. Mike and Michael, tell us how our transportation system can encourage bad driving behavior, and give an example of one project in your community that aims to change this.
Sure. I think what really encourages bad driving is the roadway design itself. For a long time, transportation and traffic engineers have built roadways with 12-foot lanes through neighborhoods. That's the size of a lane on a freeway. We have curb lanes for on-street parking that aren't being used because we have off-street parking available, and now you've got the Milwaukee slide, right? It slides around on the side. I believe we have an overcapacity in our construction. The overcapacity just lends itself to people speeding, whereas if you intentionally narrow your roads and keep things a little tighter, it forces people to slow down. My favorite road's a 2-lane road, because I can drive the speed limit and the people behind me will have to drive the speed limit. Wide turn radii that cause longer distances for our pedestrians to cross and make it much easier for people to just speed around the corner. Slip lanes, they call them pork chop islands. I think those also encourage speed. Poorly timed traffic signals can do it. Too long of a cycle, people get tired, they go. If it's not traffic responsive, depending on the area it's located, again, people get frustrated by it and say, forget it, I'm blowing the red light. I want to make it through, so I'm not sitting here for another half a minute. And I think poorly placed controls. Stop signs don't belong at every single corner, believe it or not. Sometimes it's better to take them out of neighborhoods, force the intersections to be uncontrolled, because it forces a culture where you have to slow down and look before you can go. I think we become too desensitized by the stop signs and things like that. So some examples, and this is before I joined. Again, I mentioned I joined Wauwatosa 5 months ago, but every day I drive down Wauwatosa Avenue between Harmony, which is about the downtown area, North to North Avenue, and I catch it right during the morning rush hour when kids are going to school. On the north end, we have a middle school. On the south end, we have a high school. And a little bit further south of there are a couple of private schools as well. Wauwatosa does not have busing for its population. Everyone has to walk or get a ride. My brother and my sister both have kids. One of them have kids at the middle school, the other one has kids at the high school. And my brother says to me, now that you're working at Wauwatosa, you got to do something about that traffic congestion on Wauwatosa Avenue. And I said, no, I don't. It's working perfectly. And he looked at me and said, what are you talking about? I said, because you're forced to go 20 miles an hour down this road when kids are crossing the street. And I think it's one of my favorite examples of roadway design. We have other projects coming up that will, for example, North Avenue from about 95th to, I believe, 105th Street, where we're going to be taking the road, narrowing it considerably, adding bicycle paths on the side of the road, or raised bicycle paths on the side, tighter curb radii, and we're actually going to elevate the sidewalks and keep them at the same level so that when you turn into the neighborhoods, you have an obstruction you're going over, and it also keeps your vision on the pedestrians. So those are a couple of examples.
All great examples. I think I can say a lot of things that many people in the room would probably know and agree with. I think a few other just kind of non-traditional perhaps ways to think about our transportation system is one, you have to think about land use as well. I think that's incredibly important. Our city has lost population over time for many reasons. One, we've tore down housing. We've widened our streets by literally tearing down neighborhoods, not just the interstates either. So we have those really wide streets that haven't always been that way, and I think that's hard for people to imagine that these streets have changed very recently in the grand scheme of our city. That loss of population, that land use that now caters to people driving large parking lots where you don't have that on-street parking, just all leads to just kind of the loss of people. People are in their cars, you don't see them walking, we've defunded transit. people aren't using the bus nearly as much. So just all of those factors, in addition to everything Michael said around the actual design of our streets, has led to more people feeling the need, and oftentimes they have to get in their car to get around. And that leads to this kind of me mentality of just driving fast, not seeing other people, not interacting with other people, and it's just this kind of snowball effect of the culture that we found ourselves in. You know, I think in terms of street design, we're getting there. It's going to take quite some time to reverse a lot of the poor decisions that have been made, but you know, similar to what Michael was saying, you know, every opportunity we're getting now, we're doing the exact same thing. We're narrowing streets. You know, Beecher Street on the near south side is one example of a really wide boulevard that was narrowed down. We're doing that all over the city now. Walnut, raised bike lanes, removing a lane of traffic, putting in the raised the crosswalks across side streets, Highland Boulevard, you know, even just quick restriping projects. I mean, it's happening all the time, and I know many people in the room may not always like them and think they work, but they do work. They slow down traffic, and it's an incremental approach. And it's something that, you know, I don't think there's a street we look at that we don't try and change at this point, and I know that the elders in the room would expect nothing less. Farwell and Prospect, we're looking at National Avenue, we're looking at how can we change these streets to make them safer.
Well, as a person who just got a car for the first time in over a decade, I have to say it's a fascinating experiment trying to drive the speed limit around the city. And I agree that I have 2-lane streets where there's no other room for people to pass me. I love them because I can drive the speed limit. Okay, so as noted in the introduction, past land use and transportation planning decisions have had a devastating impact on Black, brown, and poor communities. In an effort to reverse those impacts, many cities, including the city of Milwaukee, are using equity metrics to ensure investments are made in communities impacted by these past racist policies. But that also means that well-resourced, often highly civically engaged neighborhoods feel ignored. How do planners make the case for using an equity lens in prioritizing projects?
Start with the planner.
I feel like the question should be rephrased a little bit so others can answer.
I'm asking for advice.
Yeah. I mean, I think as everything Kate said, I mean, the data show exactly why we're trying to change the way we do things. Looking at crash data, looking at health data, looking at just access to opportunity. You know, we've developed internally kind of a new kind of prioritization model that looks at, you know, various equity measures from not only just race and income, but access to motor vehicles, people with disabilities. We look at crashes as well, which from all the crash analyses that are done, more crashes are happening in Black and brown and low-income communities. And this isn't new, it's just new that we're now prioritizing that, and I think it's long overdue. Equity and prioritization doesn't mean we ignore other parts of the city completely, it just means we flip the script and put in more resources and efforts into communities that, quite frankly, have been ignored for far too long. So we're doing that. We can always do better. We will try to do better, but we won't be perfect. And we hear from certain alders or constituents from well-resourced communities that they're not happy about it, but it's the data we have, it's the information we have, and it's something that if we want to have the biggest impact on this issue, we need to start focusing our efforts in areas where we know the problems are most severe.
I got a comment that's that. Thanks, Mike. That was a good comment. So to your point, one of the things that I would always tell people, and it's true though, is that a lot of these disenfranchised neighborhoods that we're talking about that are experiencing the higher numbers of all of these crises, they have had to, a lot of the more affluent areas have been built on the backs of these other neighborhoods being put on the back burner. That's the real deal here. That's the real tea. So I think that's very important, because when things get exciting in development, a lot of resources get poured over in that area. So if the, who the powers that be, because I'm not naming names, I don't want nobody to feel any type of way, but the powers that be feel like the downtown or the lakefront are gonna get the resources, and that's what's gonna get the resources, and these other neighborhoods are gonna be put on hold, and their lives have been treated as if they aren't of equal value. I mean, that's just the real deal. And so, to your point, it's time to be more equitable with these resources, you know, and that's just the bottom line. If we're, you know, neighborhood, we have, it is on the books. If you want to ask, Mike can confirm, you know, we're not gonna like, you know, point out every neighborhood, but there are neighborhoods that haven't seen, for example, a restriping of the street or anything, and you have neighborhoods that have gotten restriped 10, 15, 20 times. You know, that's not equitable at all. And so I think that, to me, is really, really starting to paint pictures for people and really starting to keep it real. It's time to stop, like, trying to hide the truth from people, that there's neighborhoods that are being, you know, over-invested in, while other neighborhoods aren't being invested in at all. So in the name of equity, you know, if we're gonna spend $1 million over here, we should be able to spend $1 million over there. I mean, and for me, I'm not the mayor of the city, but if I ever became the mayor of the city, I would be the type of person that would be like, and no pun, I love, you know, our mayor. I think he's doing great work. But I feel like, you know, I don't think there's any honor in, you know, leaving out certain neighborhoods because all of it's my city. And I mean that from a person who, you know, was born and raised in Milwaukee. Like, this is my city. Like, I want to feel great in every part of the city. I want to feel safe in every part of the city. So, and I think all of us will want that. And so I feel like, you know, from a leadership standpoint too, you don't want to just be proud. People come to your city and you in leadership and you only showing them tours of an isolated area because you feel some type of way about other neighborhoods in your city when you're in leadership positions to be able to really make change. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Pass the mic.
In 2021, I applied for the Reckless Driving Grant that the city made available because Brady Street's one of the highest incidents of traffic incidents in the city. And I was really proud of myself for applying for the grant and all my answers. And I was like, oh, I'm totally gonna nail this. And then the list came out with the people who actually got the grants, and Brady Street wasn't on it. And I was like, oh, what the heck? And then I looked at where these places were, and they were all in underserved areas. And I thought, oh, that's exactly it. Now I had prepped the board, like, well, we're gonna get this grant, we're gonna get to do this stuff. And I had to go back to them and tell them, we did not. We did not get the grant. The places that actually needed that money got it. And of course they were upset. And I oftentimes hear from people in the Brady Street area who have a very myopic view, why is everybody else getting this and we're not getting it? And I have to remind them, you've been getting it for a long time. We have $200,000 sitting in a money market account, the bid does, for a parking structure that's never gonna come. We can afford to pay for our own stuff. Let's let the resources for the city go to the areas that need it, that don't have $200,000 sitting in their money market account. So we're paying for our pedestrianization study. We're paying for a lot of the things that we're trying to do and develop as much as we can. And Jonathan's been awesome about working with us to figure out how we're gonna find additional funding, because we're gonna need more than $200,000. And it's understanding, and I have to constantly tell people, we may not have the police resources, we may not have the things that you think need to be on Brady Street right now, but Brady Street is not the center of the friggin' world. There's a lot of other areas in the city that desperately need this. We're gonna be fine. So let's just hold off and be thankful that the resources are first there, because we need everybody in the city to be strong. Brady Street's not gonna thrive if that's the only place that has those things. So it's just constantly having those conversations, having people take a larger view and understand that if you can afford to pay for it, do it, we'll figure it out, it'll be fine.
You all right if I make a couple comments on equity as well? So the city of Wauwatosa has about 50,000 people who live in it, approximately. during the day. I believe that's the size of about one City of Milwaukee aldermanic district. Is that about right? About 50,000? And so our problems may not be as big as a City of Milwaukee, but our population, when the day starts going, approximately 20,000 people in Wauwatosa leave to go to work in another community, and about 50,000 people come into Wauwatosa to work during the day. So our population swells from 50,000 to 80,000, and we need people to be able to get to those jobs, from Tosa out, from out in, and within. And so the City of Wauwatosa has a vision of inclusion for all people. We put a lot of energy towards bike and pedestrian. We put a lot of energy towards transit, and we're really excited that the BRT is going to be coming to the City of Wauwatosa, and there are plans to extend it with a hub in Wauwatosa out in out of Waukesha County. And so we're hoping that will open up opportunities for people to work and travel by means other than just automobile.
What's BRT?
Bus rapid transit.
Oh.
I often hear from residents that they want traffic safety improvements yesterday, particularly on our most dangerous streets. But as planners, we're committed to maximizing opportunities for public engagement and know that good quality engagement takes significant time. How do we balance the need to move quickly and boldly to save lives with the traditional public engagement process, especially knowing that the safest street designs may force people to drive slower or take away something like on-street parking? Do you want to comment on that? Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Start and then I'll.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. I'm just gonna quick go back to a question that was under the last one we were just talking about. So, what conversations do you have with your colleagues on the council about the varying needs of each district? And I found this last question really fascinating because I feel like Brady Street gets everything. So it's interesting to hear that. But and then I represent an underrepresented community on the near south side. I told you guys before, Latino supermajority, but very diverse. And we are working class and low income. And so it's just interesting to hear I appreciate hearing that some folks are feeling, and I suppose I've heard it from some colleagues, like Alderwoman Dimitrievich in Bayview. It is tough because she has a very demanding, and Jonathan knows because he used to represent Bayview, that's a very demanding, very active, very civically engaged, somewhat more affluent constituency. And so they do get frustrated, and I appreciate hearing this dialogue tonight. And yet everything that Angelique says I can completely agree with as well, in wanting to advocate for those underrepresented folks who aren't going to come in person or virtually to a 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. committee meeting to advocate for their community because they're at work or they're at their second job or they're just trying to survive the day. So it's an interesting balance to hear that, and so I wanted to answer this sub question around what conversations do I have as one of the electeds, conversing with my colleagues about the varying needs of each district. And the truth is I don't fight for any other, I do fight for the city. I feel like I'm a fighter for the city in general, but it's our responsibility to fight for our district. And so I fight like hell for the near south side. I feel like I'm constantly having to be a voice for us, in particular Latinos, in particular immigrants. It is something that sometimes I have to argue with my colleagues about to remind them that we're here too, and yeah, we don't vote. We're the lowest voter turnout district in the state, frankly, but we still deserve representation. We're still living here. We're still contributing to the economy. And so it's interesting because I do want to fight for the other districts, and I feel like I do in some ways, but the truth is that each colleague of mine has a responsibility to fight for their district. And so Jonathan is going to keep fighting like hell for Brady Street, even though I'm over here thinking, Brady Street gets it all. So I just wanted to answer quick that question before we moved on to the next one. But
Do you want to start the end?
yes, and then, okay, so on to the next one. Okay, typical politician. So in hearing from residents about what they want to see for traffic safety, how do we balance that need to go through the public engagement process and do something in a speedy fashion because they always want it quick, the constituents. But the truth is that it's so hard. You have to go through committee and you have to go to council, and then if there's any fighting, if it doesn't pass, we also, alders have to have a meeting. Oh, I didn't have a meeting. I got to have a community meeting in my district to get the buy-in from the constituents. And then that slows down the work that these guys need to do to hire the contractors to get the work done, to get the materials that are already at a slow pace because of the pandemic. So my answer is I don't have an answer. I would just advise the bureaucrats that are so vitally important, the planners like Mike, our city folks like Kate. I think I saw our city engineer in the house, and other, there he is over there. We just stay on us, stay on the alders, stay on the elected officials to get that meeting scheduled so that if you want this to happen quickly for your constituent, you better damn well move quickly to get that buy-in from the public. I want to say I know that's a big holdup and it can be difficult, but that would be my advice. We got to keep urging us electeds to get that buy-in because we can't wait around because of all the other steps in between and after.
I don't have the answer either, but something that I always thought about was where people are in like these neighborhoods, to get the buy-in. So I think, the public library is a big, huge resource in the community. I think it'd be kind of cool to kind of like try to normalize a place like that as a space for community vision. I saw and I've seen some really amazing ones. I want to give a shout out to Amy, long range planner at the city right here in the front. Working with her a lot too, but to me, I've really enjoyed, like I live in Harambe, Brownsville, and I've seen like a lot of development happening, community vision happening at the library, and they've gotten creative to where, different people come to the library at different times. Kids come in after school with their parents. You got, people looking for jobs or using the computers during the day. But what they would do is they would put up like boards, and they do a lot of pictures, and sometimes because a lot of all this, high level verbiage, they're not gonna understand it. So sometimes you have to use image preference surveys, like, would you prefer this type of, equipment or whatever in the neighborhood? But like, I've seen these sit in the library over 30 days and people are filling up these envelopes with like, putting stickers. Kids are putting stickers next to stuff. And I think it would be kind of cool to kind of like where the city know you can go to the library and have, put some input in something that like that's the go-to spot because it's for the public and it's open to the public and something that everybody uses. So I said all that to say that I do think that our public, spaces like the library might be a little underutilized for planning, because I noticed a lot of the planning, like Alderwoman said, weird hours, people get off work, they already tired, but some people might be at the library or whatever the case may be, but I've just seen them at really awkward hours where I'm like, if this wasn't a labor of love, I wouldn't even waste my time because this is such an inconvenience. Like, I've done planning for county transit, going like all the way across town. Like, this is the only place that this is happening. So if I don't show up, I don't get to put input. Like, yeah, it's kind of some weird stuff going on. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So to the question, how to take action quickly while still gaining input, I would say never underestimate the power of a temporary improvement or a pilot project. So an example, this past summer, 68th Street was under construction from Wisconsin Avenue on to the north. Well, there are 3 routes over the Menominee River in Wauwatosa. In Milwaukee, you have Holly Road on the east, and you have 68th, 70th, and you have Harmony Avenue. So people from 68th Street were diverting onto 70th Street in Wauwatosa, and we took some measurements of speeds and then volumes, and the speeds were, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a 20-mile-an-hour street, and it was somewhere in the mid-30s. Max speed, I think we recorded at like 70-something overnight. So we put a plan together, and we literally just took traffic barrels and laid them out in a manner that we put them in the parking lane, and then we'd alternate. We put 4 of them in the center, 2 on the outside, 1. And it reduced the speeds dramatically. We got it down to, I believe, like 22 miles an hour average, and then I think the highest speed, I think we still had a really high speeder, but it was a motorcyclist, so the barrels didn't work for them too well. But in Wauwatosa also, and this was before I was there again, North Avenue and Menominee River Parkway. There are 2 slip lanes, the Oak Leaf Trail crossings. And on the south side of the road, we got a lot of complaints about the safety of this slip lane, and so we closed it off with temporary barricades. And I hate to call you out, Stephanie Wilson of the city of Wauwatosa. If I recall correctly, didn't we do that and then we put information out where people could take a survey after we tried it to get their input? And yeah, she's shaking her head yes. And so that's worked out well. Now, we also have a plan in the next 4 or 5 years to reconstruct North Avenue from about 95th Street all the way to 73rd Street. And with that, the intersection of North and Menominee River Parkway is going to be raised because we have some bridges that have to be raised. The other slip lane, we've got a lot of bike crashes across that slip lane. And so this summer we're planning to do some temporary improvements to improve that as well. So don't underestimate temporary, cheap, inexpensive improvements, and then gather the input while you're trying it.
Agreed.
I think when I read this question, I think of it more so as a transportation planner primarily responsible for implementing things. So take that as I say that I'm glad I'm not a planner most of the time, because I feel like the engagement process is broken. It doesn't work. We've tried, we have some great people in the room here, tried and tried and tried. It's almost like we're looking for somebody to say, no, don't do this, before then we accept that answer. We have countless community meetings, in person, virtual, where you get more staff showing up than people. We take that as the decision to be made based on a handful of people who show up. We're starting to do things differently, and I think there's good things that we can do. I love going for a walk or going for a bike ride with community members and just seeing things in person. But the traditional engagement process just has not worked lately. And to Angelique's point, I don't think it's fair that you have to go anywhere and say what you like, because otherwise it may not happen. We can't expect people to do that. That's just not realistic. So I completely agree with Michael. Trying things, improvising, getting things done quickly. Don't be afraid if something fails. And I think leadership is incredibly important. And I think fortunately we have obviously incredible leadership with Mayor Johnson, but even so many of the new alders or relatively new alders, there just has to be trust. And I think that trust is there to try things and see if it works. And let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good, because we need to make things happen. We can't let things get watered down, and if it doesn't work, we commit to trying to do better. But it's, getting out and just seeing people and going for walks, going for bike rides, that's better than sitting in a room and just trying to tell people to show up, for sure.
I'm trying to take a different approach. I, quite candidly, really dislike community meetings. Really, really, really dislike community meetings. It's not because I don't like people's input. I hate being shouted at. And I get shouted at a lot because people are very comfortable on the computer telling me exactly what they think. And it's not pretty. And it's frustrating because I am trying to do my job well. I don't like being blamed for people's deaths, which is emails I've received from people. So I'm taking a different approach with pedestrianization, because I realize that I am doing, according to some people, something that's radical. I'm giving them chunks of information in the press, and then they can emote for a little while, 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, they can emote, and then I give them another chunk. And then they can kind of get their head around that, And the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work on writing an article that explains the different aspects of pedestrianization, what that can look like, because nobody seems to understand what that means, so defining it. And I'm taking it as an educational process. No, we can't do anything quickly to make quick changes, but I'm also not an advocate for quick changes, just because I don't think that's necessarily the answer. Just because, somebody asks for something, it's not always a good idea to give it to them. So is my perspective, but I'm not a planner, so I'm not gonna try to say that I know what it's like from your perspective. Just the way that I see it, I'm gonna try to chunk it out, give them the information along the way, so by the time we have to do the community meeting, and I'm also doing it in my head, like, okay, you're preparing an argument, you have to have all your ducks in a row, listen to what everybody's saying in this process now, so that by the time I get to the community meeting, I can have all the answers for them. Because they will show up, unfortunately, and I will have to talk about all of it. So it's like preparing a term paper in college. You just get all your information together so you can propose the best argument and then educate them along the way.
Just to add one thing, something I meant to say too, like our colleagues at DCD they do plans, like area plans, right? Like, and something we need to do better, which we're trying, and we hear time and time again, is like, if it's in a plan, you obviously need to go back to the community, but don't start the process all over. I think people tell us all the time they've been over-engaged. People don't want to keep coming out about the same issue, so just take that and move forward with it. Something we can do better on.
All right, we started a little bit late, so we're running a little behind, but we have just 2 planned questions left. The last one's a quick one, so start thinking about what you want to ask these wonderful people. So we've been talking a lot about street design as a way to solve this crisis, but when most people hear about the issue of traffic safety, their first thought is that it's an issue for the police to solve. What role, if any, do police or enforcement have in traffic safety? And what do we risk if we focus too much on enforcement? Sure. Okay.
Okay. So enforcement, and how much do we want to have MPD, Milwaukee Police Department, help us address this reckless driving crisis versus how much do we want to invest in the DPW and making sure that they're installing bump outs and I'm starting to learn this lingo more and more. City engineer would be proud of me. And the poles, what are they again? Flex posts. And even just even just those visuals, the paint, the stripes on there that look like bump outs, even though it's just paint. I think I think it's genius, and I think it helps. But the truth is the council did decide where are we gonna invest this? Are we gonna invest it in MPD to address reckless driving, or are we gonna invest it in DPW, the Department of Public Works? And frankly, the Common Council overwhelmingly picked the Department of Public Works and those road calming measures and road diets over MPD. We gave DPW $6 million to address reckless driving, while police got a little over $1 million. And so I can tell you myself as an elected official, I do think that MPD has a role to play, law enforcement has a role to play in enforcement. Chief Jeffrey Norman did, upon becoming, I believe he did this when he was interim chief, he created the traffic safety unit. And so for the first time in a long time, anyway, my perception is that for the first time in a long time, we have MPD pulling folks over and giving them speeding tickets. And I think that is a part of the solution. I also support the red light cameras. I don't know if you saw, if it was in the news, I think it got some coverage, but Alderman Stamper put forward a resolution around red light cameras, so you get cameras on the lights, like they've done in other cities, to also track people and issue tickets if they're found speeding. And so I think these measures do help, but there's some contention, right? There's some issue. I think Alderman Brostoff disagrees with myself and Alderman Stamper on the red light cameras, and I can understand that. I know Chicago just got sued over it, so we have to be thoughtful. We have to figure it out. I believe there's a place for law enforcement, but again, I also voted for that initial allocation of ARPA dollars to address reckless driving, and I agreed with my colleagues and overwhelmingly supported the money to go to DPW to implement traffic calming measures and the like, as opposed to giving it to MPD to wholly do law enforcement around it.
My BA's in graphic design, and I know that good design can really change things. I used to design contracts so that people would sign over millions of dollars in corporate things, and good design was a big part of that. So I think that law enforcement has the role in enforcing things, but I think that urban planners and designers are the ones who are really gonna save us. So it's you guys. Because that is how you can change people's behavior, thought process. Tickets don't do it. Although I did get used to the traffic cameras in England. I hated them as a driver, but you really did slow down. I got one once and I was really upset, and I earned it. But they really help people slow down, and you're gonna get caught. It's gonna come in the mail, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I'm a strong advocate for the use of those. I think they can really be useful in the community and help people to learn to slow down, change the behavior.
I don't know. I think you gotta be a special kind of person to sue because you ran a red light and you got caught. Like, who are the people that's suing for that? Like, that's very a real important question to me. I agree. Like, I do believe that the police, yes, their role is enforcement, but there's some weird stuff happening. Like the SOP that came out last year for towing cars that are driving 20 miles an hour over the limit. I think it should have been more to that. Like, if you don't have a license plate or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, what about the cars? It's cars that's driving 10 miles an hour, that's driving on sidewalks, at schools, and weird stuff like that we're not even addressing. And I feel like that should have been thought about. So I think that yeah, you got the people that are zooming through a red light, or like it was yellow and they saw it coming. But like, we got people that's stopping at red lights for a second, making sure that the police not around, and they're driving through the red light. Like, that's a big problem, where I'm like looking at, where are the police, the street police, the traffic police? Like, I don't see enough presence in certain areas that these are happening in. I think they probably happening at this point anywhere, because again, when we talk about people being desensitized, people are there. It's the culture now that there's nobody watching, so it's a free for all. So yeah, so I think mine is just comments, not really like I don't have any hardcore ideas, but I think those are issues that we should be talking about and trying to find a way to pilot or try something to start curbing those behaviors, because that is extremely abnormal. It is not cool to be sitting, waiting at a red light, somebody else baseline into like the special aisle that you call it. They're gonna look real quick, they don't see anybody, and so they're going about their business. That's the whole culture now. Like, something is wrong with that. So, and I think that if we at least start normalizing a conversation that this is not cool and somebody needs to do something about it, maybe somebody will. So I don't know.
Thank you.
Just to touch on it a little bit, I think, as a white male, I don't know the impacts of policing on Black and brown communities, and I hear of them, but I hear many other sentiments of the role that the police play, and I think that's important for us as planners. One, I'm not in a position to say what that role is. I think it's a community conversation that needs to happen. Some of the things I hear is, I think Angelique was getting to, like the beat cops, like where are cops walking and biking and just being a presence in the neighborhood. We hear that a lot. We hear kind of data-driven decisions a lot. I think we all know that police enforcement will not solve this issue alone. You can't expect a police officer to be out on the street 24/7. we also don't know what sort of impacts ticketing has, however. I think that's just an automatic response that people go to, and I don't know if there's much data or evidence out there showing that that's solved anything. So I think that's something important to look at going forward. But you know, every neighborhood meeting we go to, we hear different opinions and different thoughts. So I don't think we can. I know I can't paint a broad brush over what the issue should be.
I feel the same. I'm not a cop. I'm a traffic engineer. I'm not really sure what the proper level is, but my general sense is that urban planning and transportation design and traffic engineers, if we can do more to solve the problems, we won't need as much enforcement.
All right, so our final planned question before your questions. So as our discussion has shown us, this issue is complex and we know it can't be distilled down to a single soundbite. But in the title of this event, we asked what planners can do to solve the public health crisis of traffic safety. So in 1 minute, which will be timed, I got my phone out, describe the most important thing you think planners can do to reduce traffic violence. And if it's okay to save on time, we'll just go straight down the line.
I think as planners, we have a very comprehensive and well-rounded background, and I think we need to be that conduit to change. We engage folks on a regular basis. We talk to community members. We hear what the issues are. We know data. We collect data. We analyze data. We have immediate access to engineers who are getting better and elected officials who are better. So I think we need to take all that, use that. This is a huge issue. It's not going to change overnight, but we need to use that background information to figure out how we can quickly start addressing this. Where are those, easy wins? What's working? What's not? How do we motivate people to tackle this incrementally to show progress can happen? And I think that's kind of what a lot of our training is about. And since I have 15 seconds, Angelique, I miss having you around. Thank you for all the shout outs. But I'd be remiss to say it's really not me. It's Kate and Natalie and Mary doing most of the work, and Kevin obviously leading us. So thank you all for everything you do.
Let me know when you're ready with the clock. All right. I think the top things you can do, we have to create a culture of safety. We have to create a culture of walkability. Every person in this room was a pedestrian today, or you would not be here. We need to start planning around people, and we need to remember, again, we are people who happen to drive cars. We are people who happen to take transit. We're people who happen to use our sneakers. We're people who happen to use our bikes. And I think when we do that and we start focusing on that, we'll get a lot better. I imagine I have just a few seconds left, so I'll just say collaboration. We need our engineers to be talking to our planners, to be talking to our enforcement agencies, to talk to our public health officials and our elected officials. I've not heard the word Vision Zero once tonight, and the vision is no death, no injury on our roadways.
I heard Vision Zero. Just saying. No, I did though. No, planners for me, just keeping the equity focus on, looking through that lens, and then we need our allyship, regardless of you're a resident, you are a planner. Like, we need our allyship, especially for the neighborhoods that it impacts the most, because while it's great to have a person like me helping out, people are coming to me and I'm trying to, liaison that, but it's important to have our allyship, because I don't think Black or brown or any advancement that we've had in our communities, we didn't have our allyship there on the front lines helping us, talking about this, saying that this is abnormal, y'all need to do something, speaking up, doing what you can in your role to be an advocate as well. That's all I got.
Thank you. Okay. Man, this one is really hard for me. I would say that the most important thing that I would ask our planners to do to help us address traffic violence, I hope if this is on tape, I could get caught later in re-election, but I think if I was gonna pick the most important thing. I really think just based, as a layperson, I'm not a planner, and I just got into this gig as an alderman. It seems like we have to redo all of our streets. Like Mike started the conversation talking about historically, we didn't used to have streets this big. And when I get briefed on reckless driving, I hear about the big sweeping avenues in the city, and where we have reckless driving hitting the hardest are these massive streets. And I just feel like, frankly, in the South Side, we're so densely populated, it's kind of been a bit of a blessing. Because I feel like on the north side there's these huge avenues, and it's just leading us to, and I can't believe that was a minute. But I think it's narrowing the streets. That's what I think, but I don't know if it's going to haunt me later.
I think it comes down to looking at other places around the world, not just in America. It's how have other countries solved these similar problems? Because a lot of them have, or have come pretty darn close. I also think it's important to talk to immigrants. My mother's family is from Mexico. They were undocumented, living under a bridge, working at a factory. People, they have some wonderful ideas. They have brought wonderful ideas and have done great things with them. Immigrants are wonderful, wonderful assets to any community. Universities, young people, people who are willing to take a chance. These are the resources that you can use to get the energy and get the vision for something different. It's a critical part of change.
All right, so now we'll open it up for your questions. Questions in the back.
Do I need to walk somewhere, or should I just yell?
We can hear you.
I'm pretty loud, but I'll go right up here. All right. It's like kind of a multi-part question, but this is for everybody. I kind of have a saying like that every law, every regulation in human history is basically like, this is why we can't have nice things. Because some bonehead somewhere, sometime ruined it for everyone, and now we have laws. So it's obvious that we're past that point with cars. Every car that anybody owns in here can go over 100 miles an hour, at least 20 miles per hour over the highest speed limit in anywhere in the US, legally. The new electric Hummer can accelerate 9,000 pounds of vehicle to 60 miles per hour in 3 seconds, legally. So that being said, what regulation would you personally support or advocate for in order to increase traffic safety and reduce deaths from the sort of government DMV side on cars, or even the insurance industry on cars? What we can do to regulate cars to make them safer for us?
Oh, get rid of the SUV. I just hate those damn things. They are, and I apologize if you're an advocate for them, but we do not need these gigantic mammoth cars on the street every day. They're very unsafe. They're very polluting. They're very expensive. They're not doing us a heck of a lot of good. I think we need to learn how to pare those cars down. Use a car for what it's meant to be. Point A to point B. That's it, simple. If it can top out at 75 miles per hour, I don't see what the problem is. I'm also not a car manufacturer or a car person. So my family, we have one car. We only have one car, and that's no matter how much money we make with Roy's, going to have one car. And we figure out how to make that work. It's just a personal thing.
Okay, so mine goes to a different feature in vehicles that's modern today. So about 10 years ago, we started putting in rear view backup cameras, right? Well, that little screen has now evolved into a large iPad-looking device on your dash. And instead of being able to quickly, you'd know where your button was or do whatever, now you're spending more of your attention away from driving, looking at your, oh, I want that app there, I gotta swipe through. If you're not focusing on the road. And so I would find a way to get rid of those types of devices in vehicles.
This is my favorite topic. And this is my answer to the question that wasn't asked tonight is vehicle technology and vehicle design. I mean, it's just incredible that US DOT and NHTSA has not addressed vehicle size everything you said, Robin, everything that's been said, but to me, it's regulating speed. We fight, and Kate fights and fights to have scooters that are, allowed to be in the city, but then they're capped at 15 miles per hour or not allowed to ride at all on certain streets. The technology is there to cap speeds of vehicles very easily. It could be done, and it's not done, and I don't know when it will be done, but that is just so important to me.
I just want, sorry guys. I just want to thank you for that question, because that never even dawned on me, and I meet so many, now at the city, I meet so many anti-car people. It's really fascinating. And I own a small SUV that I love, and yet this is very enlightening to hear, should we consider, that never dawned on me. I don't know if we could have done that, Jonathan, if we could have introduced that when we were at the state. I'm not sure if that has to come down federally, but when I think about capping speeds in a car, I think that sounds awesome. I didn't fathom it in the past. Thank you. So it would be something that I would look towards. But again, I think it would be, the next level of government or even the feds. I think that would come from.
I mean, not really. Just 2 cents, I guess. I'm the coexist person for whatever method you decide you want to travel in, but I kind of one of those people that would do like something wild, like put all the drivers, like put y'all on the highway, and then like shrink all the roads to where like it's like bikes and scooters and strollers and runners and stuff like that. So I kind of would want to see like a slowdown in the city, and I think a big part of that was my experience on the Atlanta Beltline a year or so ago. It changed my life. I think I rode on a bird scooter for like an hour on the Beltline. It was like the whole city came together. I want to say the path was like as wide as like this room, and it was just people like pushing kids, riding scooters, jogging, and then all this development like had pushed itself around, and it was just like a low cost way to get to where you want to be. So I'm kind of like a visionary. So yeah.
So actually to follow up on that, so I'm from Michigan, so I'm not 100% familiar with stuff just yet. And I did spend my first year being pregnant here in Wisconsin, so I'm really playing catch up. However, in Michigan, if you don't have a driver's license on you, you get taken to jail immediately. Not to say that that's ever the answer. However, we were having a conversation in our office, and it pertained to traffic tickets when you're on the sideway and people are trying to plow, and then somebody has 6 tickets, and somebody has this, and somebody has this. So with that being said, what does the data look like when we analyze for speeding tickets to certain areas versus incidents? And with that data, when does that become changed for like neighborhoods or neighborhood streets? So instead of just a car accident, if let's say on Keith Avenue, there's several speeding tickets given out, when does that become actual physical change instead of, oh, well, somebody needed to be hit and killed?
So I have a follow-up question. I think to understand, are you saying we're seeing these tickets occurring, but we're not seeing change? We have to wait until someone is harmed in a crash?
Sure, we can go that route.
Yeah. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't really track a lot of that type of data.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's my point is like we don't know the effectiveness of ticketing and where it's happening. Is it reducing crashes or not? I mean, that's,
So if we put
I
red
can't
light
answer that question.
tickets on, or if we did red light like cameras, and they were to send me a ticket, which in Michigan I have several of them that I still need to pay. I am so sorry to my husband right now. But he already knows. But with that being said, I don't, like, what's the accountability if I don't even have a traceable address, and then how can that actually, that information be used for DPW or for urban planning or for real change?
Okay, go ahead.
So I think like red light running data could tell you that perhaps you've designed your street incorrectly, you've timed your traffic signal incorrectly. I think there's informative things you can get from that, that information. One of the things you started out with, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had mentioned that in Michigan, if you get tickets, they go unpaid and you go to the House of Correction or something. Is that
No,
correct?
if you don't even have a driver's license while you're driving, you go to jail
Oh,
that night, that day, if you're on your way to work.
I have no idea what it is here. Is that something that happens here? I don't think so.
Absolutely.
I think your license gets taken and your car gets impounded. So it's a little off topic, but kind of on
Sure.
topic. The police chief in West Dallas, they do a Citizens Police Academy, and Wauwatosa is starting one this year as well. And the question came up, how come you give all these tickets and no one ever goes to jail? People used to go to jail when I was younger if something happened and they couldn't pay it. And one of the reasons is there's not the capacity at the jail to take them, and two, the law changed where now if a city puts somebody in jail, the city has to pay for the time that the person is there as well for meals and things. And I'm not saying that that's the answer, but there was something on the news yesterday about something about 44% of all tickets in the city of Milwaukee were went unpaid or something last year. I'm not advocating we go throw everyone in prison.
Same.
But I think there's no hammer, and a lot of times people can't afford to pay that, right? So,
Well, I just wonder what that would look like from an urban planning, from a planner's standpoint, if we actually could use that data from the red lights, how quickly could something be implemented for change to make sure that data is actually being used to promote a safer street?
So I just wanted to add that that's terrible that Michigan does that, arrests somebody immediately without a driver's license. I would never ever support that. That's dangerous, especially for immigrants and so on and so forth. But you bring up a good point about the red light cameras, and that's why I think it didn't, as I said, Stamper just passed a resolution in support of it at the state level because it's a state bill. But we had a couple of members not support it, and it is because there are issues with it. Frankly, it's going to capture the good actors who have a registered vehicle and a driver's license that can be, license plate that can be read. We got a lot of people driving around without plates on their cars. And so how are we going to get those guys, right? Those are the real bad actors, likely, in my opinion. So, we don't know how. What I think is like you said, the plowing. When the snowplows come through, if they don't move your car, you're going to get towed or you're going to get ticketed. We don't do that. DPW doesn't do that so we can create a revenue stream. We do it because we want to create this culture, educate them so that there's compliance, so that their street can be clean, so that they can get out and move on, start their day, get to school, get to work. And so that's why the ticketing is more, to me, it's more like it's like an education measure, I think. And but I know that there's so many questions. Are these things going to work? Do the red light cameras really do what they're intended to do? And those are the things that, you're right, we have to look at data. We got to study it. And frankly, like I mentioned, Chicago just got, there was a class action suit, and they were successfully sued for their red light camera that they put in place. And so, yeah, and I don't want that happening to Milwaukee. We're already in dire straits, frankly, with our budgeting.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a lot of the data shows that some of the most dangerous intersections and roads in the city are state highways and state control. Tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I'm wondering to what extent does the local municipality and local stakeholders have control over the design of those streets? And to what extent does the state either act as a partner or, I don't know if this is a softball for somebody, as a partner or an obstacle when redesigning? You know, I'm thinking of like, Alderman design, maybe you're talking about like the wide streets that like, you know, where a lot of the reckless driving happens. I believe a lot of those are state highways. So, yeah, I'm just kind of wondering to what extent do we actually have control locally to make some of those changes you were talking about, roadway changes, or, you know, Mayfair and Tulsa and stuff like that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's countless, Farwell and Prospect are state connecting highways. Many streets people wouldn't realize, probably Farwell and Prospect, many people didn't know that, but streets like Fond du Lac Avenue, Capitol Drive, National Avenue, Layton Boulevard, 27th Street, many of our most dangerous streets are state jurisdiction highways or connecting highways. Not unique to Wisconsin. Over, historically, it's been a very difficult conversation to have with state DOTs. Traditionally very focused on moving automobiles. Here locally, I'd say fortunately we have an ally in Secretary Thompson, and he has a really good relationship with Kevin and Gerald and our mayor, and we are making incredible progress, at least in our opinion. Not everybody in the community realizes that or sees that as progress, but they're very receptive, very open to doing things that they typically haven't done or allowed. They've also provided funding for us to do things through some of their ARPA funding to address reckless driving. So, like other states, it's improving. There's a long ways to go, and it has to be a partnership because of exactly what you said. But yes, it is absolutely improving.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I just had a meeting with our city engineer and Commissioner Kruschke and Dave Tapia to discuss the National Avenue project. And I'm so grateful to the state and to Governor Evers because they are investing a lot in these projects to improve these highways. And so National Avenue is one of them, but they did just move it from a reconstruction to repaving. Pavement replacement. And that scares a lot of us because we're like, that means they're not going to invest as much, perhaps. But city engineer says there's still opportunity to advocate. And so we want to, I've been pushing them to remember that equity lens, remember that inclusion lens when you're looking at this before you pull away from us. And we still think that there's a lot we're going to be able to advocate and push the state to do. But also understanding that by doing that, potentially that puts more money, gives us more of a tab to have to cover to make those streets safer, to make them more ped-friendly, more pedestrian-friendly, more biker friendly, and so on and so forth. So it's a push and pull where I'm grateful and appreciative of the investments, but at the same time don't want to see, want to keep pushing them to do as much as possible.
All right, one final question, I think, Sam.
We get you got hit with some hard questions as far as like state and federal policy, so I want to throw back at us at the local level if you could give us some advice in closing. I heard people say like the public engagement process is broken, no disagreement there, and we heard examples of like what has really mattered as far as changing people's opinions. Mike talked about getting out and doing walking and biking, and you talked about actually seeing things in Atlanta. So those of us who are working at the local level, like what are the things, apologize to start for not being planners, but we want to hear from non-planners, like what advice would you give us as those true things we can do to have those light bulbs go off in people's minds, to change people's minds who aren't already bought into the importance of this? Like what have you seen work that takes people from resistant to wanting to see these big changes and saying, yes, I want to see it? Because I think that's where we're our overstanding as planners sometimes. It's like we get bogged down in the data, we get bogged down in our technical things, but we need to win people's hearts and minds, and you all have seen that happen. So what advice what should we be doing differently to win those people over so they become supporters, so they become zealots like we all are? Any advice you give us, I think we'd all be happy to hear it.
Well, I'm going to start because I got the mic, and thank you for that question, Sam. I think that for me, it was really helpful to get invited to this, and I really pushed back. I told Kate no a couple of times, and even today was still lamenting about it. But it really helps me. I have learned tonight more than you have to listen to these innovative ideas that I never thought of about, capping the speed of a car, and to hear Mike Amston tell me about the public engagement process being broken. That's heartbreaking and yet enlightening to hear, because what can we do to get through to the constituents in a more effective way, in a more real way? And so it has been so helpful to listen to all of you tonight. And I think inviting us to things like this, I know I recommended it should have been Bauman, because he's so smart and he's chair of public works. Mike disagreed. But I wonder if inviting a Bob Bauman to a panel like this would help. I really do. Thank you for inviting me, and I learned more than you guys did tonight. Thank you so much.
I disagree because I wanted you here.
I'm a big fan of Division Zero at least the model, because the 4 pillars is an equitable model. That framework could be used. Help me out. Equity, education, enforcement, and engineering, right? And so when you think of an engineering project, or you think of introducing an engineering project to a neighborhood, then you want to educate that community on what that is, how it affects their quality of life. You want to, really, the equity piece the equity part is really, okay, here's some engineering, what does the enforcement and what does the education part look like? So I'm a real big fan of that framework, but also I think, back to a comment that I made before, was really showing real life examples. Like, so I could say Atlanta Beltline to somebody in my community that never been out of Milwaukee. They not gonna know what that is. But if we were able to show them a video of like this going on, or if we talked about what is a chicane, but to be able to see a chicane in action, or some people, like I did for a long time, I got roundabouts and traffic circles confused for a long time. I thought it was the same thing. So I learned a lot from them as well, but I think showing people what they do, how they work, how they affect their quality of life. Like I had people complaining to me, like somebody in my family complained about the curb extensions that we got on Villa Avenue, like from a driver's standpoint, and I had to educate a family member, like this don't got nothing to do with the driver. This has everything to do with the pedestrian having a shorter route crossing the street. They might have kids in tow, groceries, something like that, to be able to get through a street that might not have any engineering, no lights, no stop sign. How can they get across the street quickly? And so I think we're gonna have to start going a little bit beyond image preference surveys, because you can show a picture of like a chicane or a traffic circle, but how does it work? What does it do? People need to know how it actually affects them and how it could improve their quality of life. So that's my 2 cents. Sorry, us in this microphone.
Kind of a combination of several things that have been said. So much what I wanted to say was said, now I've lost my thought. We just can't be afraid to try things, even simple things. I think sometimes we get bogged down, and I know I do personally, and we hear from a lot of people like it's not good enough, or where's that incredible plaza or incredible protected bike lane that we don't have yet, which we all want, we all need, and we will have them. But we have some good things happening. And we also have to realize that not every neighborhood, not every community, not every constituent may want that. They may want traffic circles. They may want raised crosswalks. And those are just as important and things that we need to be doing and showing how they work. I agree completely. Going to visit other cities and seeing things firsthand. It doesn't always have to be everything we read on Twitter and what we all want to see. It can be those simple things that have a huge quality of life impact on residents and on their residential street that we just haven't been doing yet. So I think that's, trying new things and not being afraid to improvise, and fortunately we are starting to do a lot of that.
So if I recall the question correctly, it's what can we do internally to do things a little bit better? Is that sort of a good summary of the question?
However you want it, we're all bought
I'll
in.
go with it.
Change the mind of people who aren't bought in as planners, and what do you see work? I think.
Sure. I don't really have an answer for that one. I like my question better. No, honestly, I'm a traffic engineer with a city of 50,000. I am the only traffic engineer. I see Kevin Muse is at the city of Milwaukee. I see Professor Snyder, is that, I pronounce that correctly? I see all these amazing people at the city of Milwaukee, right? Now I'm staying in Tosa, but I would love to be in the room and learn from all of you so I can take things now to Wauwatosa. And maybe West Dallas can have someone in the room and take ideas to West Dallas. And I really think we need to start thinking a little bit more than just Milwaukee, just Tosa, just West Dallas. we need to be doing a better job of communicating with each other. And by doing that, I think that's where the sharing of ideas is going to come to make things better.
All right, well, please join me in thanking our wonderful.
And everyone, please thank Kate for moderating the event. Do you have anything else? All right, I just had a couple things. One, I was remiss to mention, thank you to HNTB who sponsored tonight. $1,500 goes to the Welford Sanders Scholarship. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. If any of you would like to get involved in the Alumni Association, if you are alums, please see the table for more information on getting involved in 414 Day. And please look out for that information so we can unlock that $5,000 for the Sanders Scholarship come April. So thank you all for attending tonight. Really appreciate it.